Nightmare as a Child is a psychological Twilight Zone episode built around memory, guilt, and a buried trauma resurfacing in adulthood. The story centers on a lonely, reserved schoolteacher named Helen Foley. She lives a quiet life in a small apartment building where she's polite but emotionally withdrawn. One day after returning home from work, she notices a strange little girl sitting in her apartment stairs. The girl is dressed oddly and speaks with unsettling familiarity. She insists she knows Helen, but Helen has no memory of ever meeting her. The child calmly tells Helen that she is not imagining things and that she is connected to Helen's past in a way she does not yet understand. Later that night, Helen is visited by a mysterious, well dressed man named Peter Selden. He claims to be a former co worker of her mother, but there's something evasive and uncomfortable about him. He begins asking Helen probing questions about her childhood, specifically about a town she once lived in. As the conversation continues, Helen begins to experience flashes of memory, fragmented and disturbing images of a childhood incident she cannot fully place. The man seems to know more than he admits, gently steering her towards confronting something she has repressed for years. Gradually, Helen recalls a buried event from her past. When she was a child, she witnessed a violent confrontation involving her mother and a man. That man turns out to be Peter Selden himself. The truth emerges. Peter is the man from her childhood memory, and the little girl she keeps seeing is a symbolic or psychological manifestation of her younger self and the trauma she suppressed. Peter had been involved in a crime. He killed Helen's mother. Helen had witnessed or been present in a way that made her psychologically repress her memory entirely. Peter has since rebuilt his life, but Helen's presence has triggered his fear that she may finally remember what happened. The climax unfolds in the same stairwell where Helen first saw the mysterious child. Helen's memory fully returns. She remembers the murder and realizes that Peter is responsible. As the truth surfaces, Peter tries to overtake Helen, but the fight ends up outside the apartment and Peter falls down the steps to his death. The episode ends with poetic justice. The past cannot remain buried forever. Helen is finally freed from the nightmare that has haunted her unconsciously since childhood. Mary Janice Rule, born August 15th, 1931, passed away October 17th, 2003, was an American actress and psychotherapist. Beginning her career as a dancer, she gained early recognition in the original 1953 Broadway production of William Inge's Picnic. Rule appeared in over 20 films, including Bell, Book, and Candle with James Stewart, The Swimmer with Burt Lancaster, and Robert Altman's Three Women with Shelley Duvall and Sissy Spacek. Her television work included appearances in The Twilight Zone, Route 66, and The Fugitive. Rule began studying psychoanalysis in 1973 and received her PhD in 1983, specializing in treating fellow actors. She practiced psychotherapy in New York and Los Angeles and continued to act occasionally until her death in 2003. Rule was born in Norwood, Ohio, to parents of Irish origin. Her father was a dealer in industrial diamonds. She began dancing at the Chez Perry nightclub in Chicago at age 15, which paid for ballet lessons, and was a dancer in the 1949 production of Miss Liberty. Rule also studied acting at the Chicago Professional School. She was pictured on the cover of Life magazine on January 8, 1951, as being someone to watch in the entertainment industry. Gaining a contract by Warner Brothers, her first credited screen role was as Virginia in Goodbye, Mr. Fancy, 1951, which featured Joan Crawford in the lead. The established star belittled the younger woman, making Rule's work on the film difficult, although Crawford years later wrote a letter of apology to Rule for treating her so badly in this film. Rule's Warner contract was allowed to lapse after only 2 films. She was troubled by the attitude towards women's beauty in the studios in the early 1950s because I was afraid of being robbed of my individuality. I fought with the makeup people, the hairdressers, and I didn't understand problems of the publicity department, she was reported as saying in 1957. Rule was the original 1953 production Broadway cast of William Inge's Picnic in the role of Madge Owens, the innocent beauty, played by Ken Novak in the film version, whose company also included Paul Newman in his Broadway debut. This commitment led her to turn down the role ultimately played by Eva Marie Saint in On the Waterfront in 1954. I knew I couldn't shoot a movie all day and work stage at night and do my best in both, she was quoted as saying by Hedda Hopper in the Los Angeles Times in 1966. Among her other Broadway shows were The Flowering Peach, The Happiest Girl in the World, and Night Circus, a 1958 production which lasted for 1 week, but introduced Rule to Ben Gazzara, who became her third husband. Her other films in the 1950s included A Woman's Devotion, 1956, The Western Gun for a Coward, 57, and Bell Book and Candle, 1958, which she played the fiancée who loses publisher Shep Henderson, James Stewart, to the spell-casting witch Gillian Holroyd, Kim Novak. On television, she appeared in an episode of Checkmate, in which she played Ellen Nardos, the roommate of Cloris Leachman's character, Marilyn Parker. She played Helen Foley, of course, in The Twilight Zone, Nightmare as a Child, and which aired on April 29, 1960. She appeared as different characters in 3 episodes of Route 66. She acted as both Barbara Webb and Barbara Wells with David Janssen in 2 episodes of The Fugitive. She also played a major role as Nancy Reed in Three Bells to Perdido, the debut episode of the Richard Boone Western Have Gun Will Travel. Rule also starred, second billing to Yul Brynner, in the Western film Invitation to a Gunfighter in 1964. Among her later roles were Emily Stewart in The Chase, 1966, Sheila Summers in The Ambushers, 1967, Burt Lancaster's bitter ex-lover in The Swimmer, 68, Willie and Robert Altman's Three Women, 1977, journalist Kate Newman in Costa Gravas's political thriller Missing, and Kevin Costner's mother in American Flyers, 1985. Rule had a brief engagement to Farley Granger in 55. They had appeared in the Broadway play The Carefree Tree in 1955. Next followed a relationship with Ralph Meeker. Meeker had played Hal in Picnic. Rule was briefly married during 1955 to television and film writer N. Richard Nash. Her second marriage was to television and film writer Robert Thom in 1956. They had one daughter, Kate, before divorcing in 61. Her last marriage was to actor Ben Gazzara in 61, having one daughter together before they divorced in 1979. In the 1960s, she became interested in psychoanalysis. She began her film studies in 1973, specializing in treating fellow actors, and received her PhD 10 years later from the Southern California Psychoanalysis Institute in Los Angeles. She practiced in New York and Los Angeles and continued to act occasionally until her death from cerebral hemorrhage in 2003. She was cremated after her death. Elizabeth Teresa Terry Burnham, born August 8, 1949, died October 7, 2013, was an American actress. She had most of her career as a child actress in television series. She's best known for her performance in the Twilight Zone episode Nightmare as a Child. Burnham played the younger daughter of Lana Turner's character in the film Imitation of Life, 1959, which was widely popular. Burnham retired from acting in 1971. Elizabeth Teresa Burnham was born 1949 in Los Angeles, California. She was the younger of 2 children born to Guy Calvin Burnham, an aeronautics engineer at Douglas Aircraft Company, and his wife Elizabeth Teresa Buenla Simmons, a homemaker. She was raised Catholic and attended St. Maria Goretti Catholic School, St. Cornelius School, Mark Twain Middle School, and Bancroft Junior High School. On December 22, 1955, she made her television debut at age 6 alongside Brandon DeWilde in the series Climax, in an episode entitled The Day They Gave the Babies Away. This was based on the 1946 novel of the same title, which was adapted for the 1957 film All Mine to Give. More prominent roles soon followed, most notably in 1957 with Let There Be Light, an episode of the series M Squad, which starred Lee Marvin, who Burnham later singled out as her favorite actor. Also that year, Burnham was set to star in a new child-centered series, Turquoise Ink., whose writer-producer Dick Chevillet and Ray Singer touted her as TV's first Shirley Temple. The projected series was never produced, but a year later, Burnham appeared in an episode of Temple's own series entitled The Magic Fishbone. It was adapted by Margaret Fitz from Charles Dickens' short story of the same name. She first attracted national attention as Susie, the 8-year-old daughter of Lana Turner's character in Imitation of Life. Sandra Dee played the girl as a teenager. Burnham worked in numerous TV episodes and series throughout the late 1950s and 1960s. Then she retired from acting in 71. On October 7th, 2013, Terry Burnham died of cardiac arrest. As she had no surviving next of kin, her unclaimed cremated remains were stored at Los Angeles County Crematorium. On August 8th, 2018, which would have been her 69th birthday, Burnham's ashes were buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Long Beach. This is the acting debut of Morgan Brittany. She was uncredited even though she had several lines near the end as the little girl with the doll. Janice Rule's character Helen Foley was a tribute to Rod Serling's drama teacher of the same name at Binghamton Central High School. When the police lieutenant comes up the stairs, he bends over the railing partway to avoid bumping into camera and lighting equipment in the landing. The episode almost certainly inspired the 1964 film Marnie by Alfred Hitchcock. The main character is a woman named Marnie who, as a little girl, witnessed her mother being murdered by a customer and traumatized, suppressed her memory. The central theme is the mind's ability to bury unbearable experiences. Helen does not consciously remember the traumatic event from her childhood, but it continues to surface in fragmented forms. A child on the stairs, unsettling familiarity, emotional unease. The episode suggests that trauma does not disappear, it waits beneath the surface until something triggers its return. Peter believes he has escaped his crime by assuming a new identity and living a normal life. But Helen's presence shows that the past has its own persistence. In the Twilight Zone, time is not linear in a moral sense. Actions echo forward, and consequences eventually find their way back. Helen's experience of seeing the child is symbolic. She's confronting her younger self. The episode plays with the idea that identity is layered. The adult self and childhood self are not separate beings, but parts of the same psychological continuation. The nightmare as a child is not something she once experienced, it's something she still carries. Unlike many Twilight Zone episodes that rely on supernatural justice, this story uses psychological justice. Peter is not just punished by the law or fate in a dramatic external way. Instead, he's destroyed by the return of memory and truth. The punishment is internal, the collapse of the false life he built. The episode keeps the viewer uncertain about what is real until the final revelation. Is the child real? Is the psychology real? Or are these projections of Helen's mind? The answer gradually resolves into a psychological explanation, reinforcing a key Twilight Zone theme. Perception can be more powerful than objective reality. A major underlying idea is that truth cannot remain hidden forever. Helen's mind is drawn towards resolution, even resisting it at first. Peter's deception is frail, depending on her continued ignorance. Once truth emerges, the entire structure collapses. Nightmare as a Child is one of the more understated Twilight Zone stories. It avoids monsters or science fiction gadgets and instead focuses on memory, guilt, and psychological suspense. Its strength lies in the atmosphere and gradual revelation rather than the shock twists. The episode reflects Rod Serling's interest in moral psychology, the idea that the most frightening forces are often internal, not external. In the end, the nightmare is not a ghost or a fantasy. It's the truth the mind tried to and failed to forget. This is a fantastic episode. Acting is superb. The realizations are wonderful. The way they open up the story slowly but surely. I think if you've watched The Twilight Zone or any other type of suspense type show like Alfred Hitchcock Presents or Climax or any of the other psychologically bent type shows, you'll probably catch on with the concept early on. If you are not that familiar with psychological stories, you may not. Be that as it may, this is a fantastic story. The acting is terrific. The little girl is phenomenal. Janice Rule does a brilliant job of making you care for her and realize that she's slowly but surely putting pieces of the pie together. So please check it out. It's a very entertaining and exciting episode. 5 out of 5.